Good afternoon to all of you. I am happy to be here in Le Havre this afternoon to share with you this feedback. Le Havre is a symbol for me. This is where I started my career in waste management and environmental services 20 years ago. And it was here in Sandouville where Renault had put up that pilot plant to test a new concept. Waste. In other words, please invent a plant that would not produce any waste. And I remember what my friends told me, Eric, you're not going to try and saw the branch on which we're all sitting. And then others were saying, you're working on a project that will never see the light of day. And it did take 3 years for us. And then after 3 years, we imagined a concept. We obtained a partnership and deployed this not only with this particular manufacturer, but on other European sites and then with other manufacturers. And now I am supposed to deploy another situation. 10,000 subsidiary people working for the subsidiary develop the company and draw or involve all of the cleaning company in working further. What we used to be were just street sweepers or seen as street sweepers. What we did was implement different types of approaches to development and innovation. One was to deal with more technical work, for instance, how to clean different paint spraying rooms. And then, after being unsuccessful for a few years, we suddenly got a major contract in Sandouville again. And I remember, again, in cleaning, you always work with staff. And so there we were at night with 45 staff from the North African part of Africa who were there again. And then when we visited the place, somebody challenged me. Alexander was his name, and he said, hey, boss, look, come and see. Look, you've got to see how we work here. So my colleague said, well, Eric, let's not lose our time. We're going to spend our night here otherwise. Spend all day. And then I decided to go and see Alexander and follow. And 2 hours were spent that were very important in my life because I noted these people that we were going to use for a contract, we were going to make them work in conditions that were not acceptable, in mutagenous, carcinogenic products that we had not identified. They were going to go working in different shafts in insecure conditions with no protective equipment. And then that's when I noted that we hadn't taken into account the protective equipment costing €1,000 each time. Each one. So what would we do? Should we bypass this particular contract that would bring us 2 million contracts? If others had done that for 10 years, we would have done the same. No. I decided to go and talk with the customer, thinking that we might lose the contract. But still, I decided to put everything on the table and start talking. And so in a few weeks, we decided and we worked hard, and all of the staff was then made safe. This proved to be successful for these operators who started working in safe conditions. For our customer, because 45 people meant that was one thing, but then we moved to 25 in 6 months. And it was the beginning of an incredible development. As an example, the customer gave us other contracts, and this meant that that particular structure developed wonderfully, and we developed 110 million euros of organic growth in this very difficult job of industrial cleaning. And if I'm sharing here with you, is because I'm convinced of two things, thanks to this feedback. When you are into innovation, it takes time. It might sound obvious, but time is sometimes the opposite of what the funding people ask of us because they keep looking at financial results per quarter. The second thing that we are convinced about is that we can't do a thing right now in terms of innovation if we don't put at the heart of all of this the leader as an example. And so a partnership is something that you build. And I decided to train myself, to train in a master for ethical leadership, a training for leaders done over 3 years, 30 days a year, working on oneself. And then a few years later, I decided to create Incub Ethic. We are an integrator of innovations, and I started with what I felt was important to me, looking at all the different services for the environment. But also, I was very touched by climate changes, and so I decided to look at what I could contribute on this. The second thing I thought that was very important was people. I mentioned that earlier. And then connected to this, to innovation and development, how could investment could be at the heart of all this, to take part in innovation and to create a better world, to be able to then create value. And this is why Incub Ethic Invest was created. We decided to work on this paradigm shift, this new paradigm. And then the first question was, how can we think about an investment that would be ethical? And I'll come back to this in a minute. And also that could be profitable. So the first thing I noted was, I looked at what was being done in the world of finance. You received a lot of illustrations today about all of this. And I noted that on the one hand, you have wonderful things happening in social economy. And then you have ISR and how to drop down externalities, find what is best in terms of investments, investing for what is socially responsible. And then I saw that all this was working in, everyone was in silos, working for funding north-south. Your investment has to be above 2 million euros, otherwise we're not interested. And then you have other funds that are well structured. But everybody in social economy or ISR, everybody was working with Chinese walls in complete ivory towers, each one. And so we decided to develop this at Incub Ethic Invest. Needs are cross-sectional, horizontal. They're not in individual needs. Look at energy. Look at energy insecurity. There are 5 million people in France right now that have no access to energy. We have problems in the world on the impact on climate changes. What can we do about these 200 million people who are climate change refugees? And deforestation that leads to drought, that leads to more people in cities. What can we do? This is a worldwide issue. And then in France, we talked about safety in companies. We are told you have to work longer, until 62, maybe tomorrow until 67. But at the same time, 3/4 of the illnesses of people have to do with musculoskeletal illnesses. And all this is going to have an impact on people. So what do we do? So what is our challenge, the ethical challenge? It means that we need to put 7 basic needs of individuals at the heart of all this. Anybody living in Europe, in France, in Asia, in Africa wants to be healthy, so that they can use the best of their themselves. They want to be safe, to be respected in their lives, in their environment. People want to be in a situation of well-being and balance. They want to be also in an environment that will include them, to have access to knowledge, and to then make a success of their lives. And so, what about the projects and the people who are project leaders? Do they want this? Will they put these needs at the heart of what they will do? What about investors? Will they answer positively to all of this? Once we talked about the ethical reference, we need to talk about tools. It's one thing to say we want to follow this, but then how do we do it? So we worked on global quality at a human level. We can't really roll this out or describe it fully. And instead of doing that, I'll give you a couple of examples. At Incub Ethic Invest, we work in different industrial sites where waste is reused. So we look and we see what the technical innovation could be. I'm 3 points ahead in terms of energy output. But if I don't look at what comes out of my chimney stack, that won't be good. And you know that there are a lot of standards that need to be taken into account. The second example is that I would like to act around me. What is around the incinerator? What about the heat networks leading this heat to housing developments? So we have to look at all of this, to the positive impacts. We've noted what doesn't work now. We are not able to detect all these capacities to act, to make decisions, and see how we will then return to how things can be improved. And so working with the local neighborhood, we need a contract so that we will be serving the populations, and then we will work and find answers in terms of energy insecurity. So we need to also prepare this for future generations. This tool was then certified as ethical. And now we're talking about quality at human level. And now I can talk about quality by human decision. Often in companies, we focus on processes, but we also need to focus on who the people are who make decisions. That's what we're working on. And so Incub Ethic Invest decided to pick up the challenge of finding projects that would answer all of this. And we will offer a project mix that will take all this into account by supporting you and then bringing investment between 20,000 to 300,000 euros. But it's not this or that. The idea is to be able to answer at all the levels: health, education, environment, energy, mobility, quality of life. And with just a few environments, we are now able to invest in projects such as the one you will hear about tomorrow by Nicolas Metro. How can you use trees as a resource for populations? In a few years, you're able to set up an industry so that after you use acacia gum, you can use this as a nutrient, natural nutrient, and you can have 100,000 people who live from that. That is a solution against deforestation. It's also an excellent result for populations where their revenue will increase. And it's also a way of fighting drought. This is a first example. A second one, Caroline Sud next door talked about living school. Her project is mature now. She has 100 families waiting to register for her new classes. In 2 or 3 years, she wants to open a secondary school. And this is what we do. We can support such projects that work on a long-term basis. Then I told you about energy efficiency. We're fortunate because we have people nowadays who are working on such projects. We talked about energy transition. This is what we are working on with our feedback or return on investment, which is sometimes shorter than expected. For an investment of 2 million euros, we can then produce easy enough return on investments. It's easy technically, it's feasible technically. You have to work with all the stakeholders. But then if you expand further, then we can add additional value for the local populations. A fourth example, I was telling you about TMSs. Telling you about muscular and skeletal diseases. We have a company working on this, and now we want to work more and more with that company to try and change this situation. And so, can we be both ethical and profitable? This is a new paradigm that we want to work on. Obviously, we have tools. Our analysis tool is at human scale. We want to identify as much as possible. We come from the industry. We have delivered projects. We know what return on investment is all about. ROI, and we take this into account. But mostly we wait for projects to be mature, and we will then invest when their models will have proven successful, answering in terms of ethical positioning and economic robustness. And so that way we will then be able to invest virtuously with 7 or 8 years, a horizon of 7 or 8 years, not much more. And so if projects demonstrated that ethically they're worthwhile but not quite profitable, we will support them. Some are profitable, but they are missing just a few bits and pieces in terms of ethics. And there again, we will support them. And so we need to find a new balance for the different stakeholders. And we have talked about the fact that everybody was working each in their own corner. What we want to do now is sit around the same table and make our project successful. And this is why we need trust on the part of the investors who want their investments to have a meaning. They want to find projects where we need to know what they are waiting for at 7 years, at 8 years. And so the objective of Incub Ethic Invest is to find the right options. And I talked to you about the timeline. So we're going to look at how we can work on this. Once we have trust, then if we have several projects, if this project mix is such that only one does not deliver right, the others can work it out. And we have projects that are highly profitable, really good value because we know what we're delivering. In terms of energy, for instance, it will be we'll have a return on investment or amortization in 5 or 7 years. What is difficult is to find all these projects, bring them together so they will all be profitable. And then cash flow, some produce faster than others. And thanks to that, we will then be able to answer the requests of some of the investors who say, will I be able to profit and to obtain gains from this? The idea is to increase the margins, find the investors who are individuals, people who say, I want to take part in this project. We need to find family offices also. There are a few in France who are ready to invest and help. And then use all of the new participatory funding or crowdfunding systems that will be available. And also we work with partnerships with banks, with institutional funds, with institutional structures. They will all be ready to come and help us once we will have delivered the first results. And we discuss with a lot of partners at this stage. So, do we have a challenge for the 20 years to come? I'd like to say, well, the good news is that projects are available. There are so many of them. I have found a lot of project leaders who have told me, Eric, we need this. We need ways in which that somebody who will invest between 50 and 100,000 euros. Business angels, there aren't enough. Great funding funds aren't interested in us. We're too small. And so we need to help them along to help them mature. Money is there. There's even probably more than we think. It's probably easier nowadays to find 2 million euros than 50,000 euros. And so it's a new way of investing that we would like to put together for the 20 years to come. It's a challenge that we're picking up. So let's meet again in 20 years again. And I have another challenge today. I celebrate my 20th anniversary today. And so I want to mention my wife, who is here, because 20 years is something that is worth mentioning.